It is 6 p.m. The course is HCA520 7AX, which officially meets at 6 p.m. on Thursdays. And what is due this evening? Of course, if you have from Module 1, if you have any final drafts or any other corrections that you want to make on your original draft of the task, that's due by midnight tonight. Discussion. We already started, the first response. Now, I'm also going to put in I had a synopsis video of like what's due, when it's due, but it's kind of corrupted, so I might have to either do it again, or one of your classmates suggested that I just put it down on paper, virtual paper, and just put it on the announcements. And also, I'm recording this session as well, so that I had a request from one or two of you that, hey, can you just, even though they're relatively short sessions, there's some things that that they want to just look over and see again. And of course, on your original discussion, make sure to reply to at least one of your colleagues, and make sure that the reply is just like, well, not just like, but similar to your original response, which should also have some data behind it. So it is not enough. And I'll catch up with the discussions hopefully tonight. Now, the lesson, which was assigned last week, which is due today, that is also, and just for a quick synopsis, you were to review your, and don't do, of course, I hope no one did the activity one. You were supposed to get a little mini paper out on utilizing these things. And also, as a little extra, you don't necessarily have to utilize what's in here. If you have other sources that are better, maybe you took another class somewhere that has a better set of tools, then yes, of course, by all means use it. But remember, be specific. I will also grade this as well in the next day or two regarding, yeah, question.
Yeah, I do have a question. Sorry to interrupt. I went to the job aid because I was looking at the activity too, and then I couldn't find the recording from last week. And I went to the
Yep.
and lesson one on the job aid has something completely different. So
Yeah.
for this one, you want me to just do a paper because
Yeah, because you saw some of the things like what we're talking about today. It says like do a poster or something like that. I'm not it says things like do posters and stuff like that. I'm not a fan of that because
Okay.
It's not, I don't know. I just find it it's just my preference. I'd rather read it and because what this course and of course hopefully what your program should do is hone skill sets that for analyzation and also for data gathering from multiple sources. That's why they give you so many things to look at. My job is simply to just steer and show you like for example, I like these one through seven, but I like this one better. And for what we talked about last week. Now I didn't do a video because we met so quickly last time, and we will do that because again, I'm just facilitating. It's like a we're doing. Well, I was informed that to perform this course as similar to a directed study, where you guys do work. I don't lecture. I don't prepare anything. You do everything, and my thing is just to give feedback and also remind you when things are due. The typical things of that matter. But yeah, let's go over. Let's do what we discussed during our little mini sessions here on Thursday evenings, and that's why I'm recording them because another one of your colleagues pointed the same thing out that, hey, what do I do? Well, it's on the job aid or what you told me to do.
Yeah,
I
I
like, I prefer
remember
that.
what was in the job aid, and it was asking me to create assessments. So
Yeah,
we're just gonna do papers.
no, this is, you could, because what we were doing was creating an assessment plan. So if you could recall last week, the first thing you had to do is look at the Mercy situation, or the, what do you call that? The Mercy case study, and pick
Mhm.
the top 5 things that are wrong with it. The top 5 things that you don't like about it. And then utilizing any of these things here, and any outside sources as well. What goes, what would be your next step? So you have one part of the paper is your assessment, which are the top 5. Then which are the, goes, from your evaluation, what assessments would you do? And specifically, I pointed out, let me bring this back to this chapter. I specifically pointed it out, like these particular chapters, like the dashboard and scorecards, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 10, uh, and and to try to figure out a serial assessment on how you are to bring back Mercy Hospital, or a not the similar, but the Mercy Hospital, how to bring it back. Like, what was the example I used? The patient satisfaction rates. Let's say, for example, the hospital, a lot of our patients don't like our hospital. Okay. You have to find out, you have to perform your assessment. Why? And what assessment tools would you use? When would you do those? When would you apply those assessments? How often would you relook at it? And what are all the departments involved? Do it in a fashion where, if you were, if you were the administrator in the hospital, how would you go fix it in a practical application sense? And that's better than, right, that's better than trying to find collateral documents, like what documents you would use. The key for this particular activity is a detailed plan. First, have your assessment, which are the 5 things that you don't like about the Mercy case, and what would your detailed plan, including what rubrics, what tests, what metrics, what kind of dashboard would you use? And the other thing that I also mentioned from last week is, you could try to reinvent the wheel, which is not advisable, or find a similar case in the real world, which is even better, that matches Mercy Hospital. For example, one of the big things of Mercy Hospital is they have a culture problem. And as I mentioned in previous meetings, it's one of the hardest things to overcome, because if no one's matching the vision and the mission statement, and everyone's doing their own thing, that's a real problem. So let's say, for example, that's one of your problems. What is your detailed plan? Because what evidence would you use to report to whoever you report to that, yes, I'm fixing this, and this is how I'm fixing it, and this is the evidence of how I'm fixing it, which is essentially the real world. Did I answer that clearly enough, or want me to, anything else I have to add? Does that answer your question?
Kinda. So you just want me to do a paper?
Yeah, but the
Okay.
paper must have these elements, right? Let me write them down, just so we're all on the same page. Or it could be a memo, but that's what a memo is. It's so of course you have to have your assessment. What do you think are the top 5 things wrong with Mercy? Top 5 problems or issues, because Mercy is a train wreck. So there could be dozens, but what are your top 5 problems? So after it goes, now, of course, in your paper, your assessment is, of course, your opinion, but you must have data to back your opinion. So what evidence do you have that those are the top 5 problems, and those are the top 5 issues that would kill a hospital? Okay. The next would be, of course, your plan, which would be the timing when you implement the plan, also which metrics, and that relates to, that dashboard, you know. And remember, what is the dashboard? You're looking at you're looking at how fast I'm going, how much fuel am I using up, do I need oil, is the temperature too hot, and along with timing, and I mentioned Gantt charts, you could put your Gantt chart or some sort of plan. Like, I'm going to do this every month. I'm going to do this every week. Like, for example, if you're doing authoritative top-down management, it seems okay to assess your people once a week or twice a month. But if that's not your style and you feel that that would be a detriment to Mercy Hospital and to the already failing morale at Mercy, then that timing might not be sufficient. And then again, where's your evidence? If I only want to do something once a week or twice a week, what model are you basing it on that is once a week? Are you guessing? Or that's what you feel it's like? Because remember, just like we stated before, this is a systems course. Everything should be planned. And when you make a plan, you're not making it because you think it's right. You're making a plan because you're utilizing something that was utilized before, maybe in a similar industry, and that it works. That's why I'm not a fan of reinventing the wheel and trying to guess when's the best time to assess. Every week, every month, every year, twice a year? I don't know. So you have to do your research to find what works and evidence that it did work. So essentially, every time you give an answer, like your plan, your timing, your metrics, which metrics you're going to choose, which are the top 5 problems, you're always backing it up on, you're always trying to find data somewhere, and as recent as possible, that's backing you up. Because that first thing that the first assignment we did was simply a warm-up. It was simply, can you do some basic research? I wanted to see how you guys write. But this is actual what I go, and I'll be a little bit more critical about this, about where'd you get your data from, and so on and so forth. So yes, it's a paper, but you're actually outlining, if you were in the real world, how would you fix Mercy? And because if you're coming into a train wreck of a facility, which is, it's almost never that way, it's more subtle in the real world. But if you're coming into a train wreck of a facility, it's going to have 1,000,002 problems. Or even if it's a good facility, you're there to improve it. You can't tackle everything all at once. It's impossible. And that's actually a recipe for disaster. You tackle the more primary things that will sink your ship or sink your facility first. And that's a better way of doing it, because if anybody here clinical, did any patient care or seen patients before? No? Are you guys all administrative type people?
I'm an LPN.
Oh, okay. So if your patient has, and also for the non-clinical people in the room, if you have a patient with 1,000,002 problems, I'm not gonna, like, let's say for example, there's a problem list, a typical problem list, especially for an older patient, would have 12 or 15 things wrong with the patient. I want to tackle the top 3 that's going to land my patient in ICU or land my patient in the morgue. That's the ones I'm going to tackle first. All the other ones I'm going to deal in due time, but the more critical ones. So that's where this assessment piece goes of the assignment is important. Goes, and of course your analysis and your opinion of it has to be based on some sort of data, right? And your planning and timing has to be based on in some reality. Well, how do other hospitals do it? How do other facilities do it? And again, you could sit and try to, and I think that's also the problem with a lot of newbie administrators. They try to invent the wheel, they try to be creative, and in that creativity, they're actually creating something that's more difficult. And I'm not one of those. And we'll see on this week's also as well, when we start talking about this week's task in a moment, that Um, being creative. Yes, there's creativity to a point, but there's also the hard, honest data that of what works. So being innovative all the time may not be the answer. And it could be just good old fashioned, change of management. Very, very simple things. So does that outline it a little bit better on how to write your response and how to write your paper? Or you need something more? Are we good? Or- okay, alrighty. So, but again, if while you're doing it, you're running into a roadblock, shoot me a text, shoot me an email, and I'll respond and try to help you out. So that was the lesson from module 1 due this evening. Now, what's due next week? Let's jump right now into module 2. And module 2 will now run into this week to next week, and next week into week 5, which is midterm. So, of course, the initial discussion thread, watch the new tech, new morals, and want you to pick specific advances in technology. And I'm sure the TED Talk has some examples, but find your own, and that has moral implications. Now, can anyone answer? Anyone took medical law and ethics or the principle of ethics? Can anyone tell me the difference between law and ethic? You can unmute. Go ahead. We're a small group. What's the difference between law and ethic and ethics? Anybody? Which is the higher standard? How about that? Is the law the higher standard or the ethic?
I think that's dependent upon who you ask, sir, but I would dare say that law has the higher standard because it comes with the greater penalty, and ethics are based on, and this is just me, ethics based on individuals' morals and individual principles.
Well, you kind of got it. I get your rationale, but it's kind of backwards. The law is the lower standard. The law is the most minimum thing you have to do to keep out of jail. The law is the most minimum thing you got to do, and yes, it has higher consequences, but it is the lower standard. Like for example, it is the law. I must drive on the right side of the road. But the ethics or moral implications are the higher standard. And if any of you guys get a chance to take medical law and ethics, please do so. It is one of those easy courses that it's nice. And by the way, law used to be my thing before I became a chemist. I was in pre-law at Fordham University, New York City. I was supposed to be a lawyer, but I fell in love with chemistry and then became a chemist. And the one thing that I've learned, and also I was on both Gannon Debate Council and National Forensic League. And the one thing I learned about the law is, and you are correct, sir, it is fully open to interpretation, all of it. That means even though I killed somebody with my car, I violated the minimum standard. If I have a good lawyer, I will beat it. And unfortunately, the real world proves it every time. And that's the lower standard. Now, we're in healthcare, and that's why I stayed in healthcare, because it is always the higher standard, and it's what we should do, not we have to do. And what was my point regarding advances in technology? Now, there are advances in technology that are perfectly legal, and the minimum standard. For example, all across the world, there's a whole bunch of people doing stem cell research, okay? But there are a whole bunch of people who believe that it violates an ethical standard. And it's the main issue that they have, and this is an example, and you could use this example. The main issue is that where do we get that material? Anyone know where we get stem cells? Really good stem cells? You get it from unborn children. And that's a problem. Now, there's no law that states, well, there are laws, but in other countries and other locales, especially in Eastern Europe, especially in Southeast Asia, that they don't have ethical boards in their hospitals, but every hospital in the United States does. They have a bioethical committee that has an ethicist, has a legal team, and that's where we get sticky. And the one thing about systems is a lot of facilities go under because they get greedy and they forget the compliance aspect, which is the legal matter. But if we all have a proper mission and vision statement that says that we have to adhere to the higher ethical standard. So the TED Talk, I'm not a fan of TED Talks, but it does present a very interesting thing. So try to find, if you have one that you can that you really like, but try to find several things in technology that have moral decisions and moral implications. You could talk also about big pharma. There's a lot of things in there, Also, just by the actual way research is done. You guys know that. Did any of you guys take a research methodology class or remember how basic research works? Does anyone remember? Let's say, for example, I got a cancer drug, right? You guys know that there has to be a control group, a group that gets no drug. And now you have to ask yourself, okay, did these people that are in the study have cancer? And I'm purposefully not giving them drug just for the sake of knowledge and for the data. And that's also a moral problem, moral consideration. But here specifically, we're talking about technology. There's also a lot of groups that have a problem with artificial intelligence, AI. There's a big saying in medical law and ethics: just because you can do a thing, and of course, also just as a little background regarding some of my education, Fordham University is a Catholic university, so they're big on ethics. They're big on right versus wrong. I had to take 4 comparative religion courses in my core. And the neat part of it is that they didn't like spoon feed or force feed Catholicism or any one thing. They actually told you, hey, you should take at least one Muslim studies course. The other course I took is on the interpretation of the Ketuvim and Judaism. So I took a little piece of everything. And actually, that's what you should be able to do when you're doing your research. Take a little bit of everything. Find all the different types of technology, a little bit of everything, and outline why is it a moral imperative that we should either do something or not do something. And when you guys reply to each other, please, again, it gets a little touchy because all of us have different backgrounds, and what do they say? One person's religion is another person's belly laugh. So I'm not saying tread lightly, but tread respectfully. When I was teaching medical law and ethics, sometimes some of the discussions got a little bit hairy, but you guys are pros. So I just have to say that as a generalized public service announcement. So that's discussion 2. That's, of course, due next week. Let us look at module 2. Let's look at the task. And of course, the lesson for module 2, we won't discuss until next week. Now, what is this week's task for next week have to do? Again, it has to do with mercy. But now it's asking you to look at its specific 4 systems. So you could see that there are like 2 steps. So the first step, of course, again, it's looking like wash, rinse, and repeat, just like the thing that I mentioned before. Just like this, you have an assessment. You look at the four systems, and here are your four basic systems, right? And what do you need to do? First part is you identify all four systems, which function, right? And of course, your investigation or your assessment or your little grade on how well is it doing, and then prioritize it. This is an example where it says, the priority is the clinical information systems or the EMR, the electronic medical records, and then it's an HR thing, and then there's a finance, and at the very bottom it's the labs or information systems for your objective data. Now, if you agree with this, okay, then of course, have your evidence all in a row why this is a priority, then this is number 2, this is number 3, and this is number 4. Now, another thing that you have to do for this particular task is you have to ask yourself, is a commercial option viable for the system in question? So for example, for the greatest issue is, like, for example, EMR. You guys know that there are commercial options for different EMR systems. You look at the systems here in Northern Virginia or in the DMV and ask yourself, which are there commercial options available, and which is the most viable commercial option, and then give me the reason for that particular EMR. For the HR systems, your question would be, should I keep it in-house or should I outsource it? Same thing with financial systems. The example I typically use, all of you MBA people, tell me what SOX compliance is. Anybody? SOX, short for, anybody? Sobranis-Oxley or Sobranes? I don't know. I've always pronounced it Sobranis. Sobranis-Oxley or SOX compliance. Anybody know SOX compliance? Anybody? Right? I'm sure when you guys were in your program, you remembered, but memory's a funny thing. Anybody? No one remembers SOX?
Isn't it an auditing system?
Yep, it is. And it's an auditing system that, why we made SOX is because the one thing about your financial team, they're going to always want to make, just like everybody else, everyone wants to look good, yes? We always want to come out top on our metrics so we get our bonus, so we be happy at the end of the quarter. But we all know that you can't do that, especially if you're a publicly traded entity. Even if you're a privately owned entity, you have to report to somebody, your CEO, your CFO, the board, and whatnot. And SOX compliance is very, very tricky. It is essentially proving that all your financials are on the up and up. And that's horrific stuff. And I've been on teams where we did it ourselves. And it was, of course, biased. And then, that's a problem, because if you can't listen to your own report card, or imagine like this is a human being and they're doing their own report card on how well they're doing. Of course, they're going to give themselves a good grade, right? Anybody remember the housing bubble, right? Do you guys remember that? On what the lending companies were doing? They were violating SOX left and right. Why? Because they want to look good for clients, right? Any company that tries to sell itself, oh my gosh, that's one of the first things. If I'm looking at a company, I'm going to look at their last SOX audit. I want to see the truth. I want to see the books, the real books, not the second set that you keep for the government. And everyone has at least 2 sets, which is unfortunate. Again, the higher versus the higher ethical. So you got to ask yourself, should I keep my financial people in-house? Or do I hire an outside firm? So that's another commercial entity. And you guys also know, those of you clinical people know that no hospital, it's not like the old days where the hospital did everything. The hospital, again, remember we talked about lean management? There are many times where the hospital outsources its labs, and it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. So look at also the laboratories, like, is it better to have an outside laboratory? Just give all, is it more cost effective? And again, find your commercial options viable. And the typical rule of thumb in the real world is you have to have at least 3 to 5 competing offers. And once you have that, that's when you can bring it to your, whoever you answer to, and then a decision can be made. For example, on my little world, I need my microscopes cleaned and refurbished. So in order for Dr. Asidebe, which is our campus president, in order for her to give me the money, I have to do what you guys are doing right now. I have to have a memo, or in your case, Microsoft Word paper, right? I have to have a memo that says, what is the function of my request? Here are the 5 different commercial options. Here's my choice of the 5 commercial options and why. And here are my issues and concerns, goes if we do not get what we need to get. Okay. Now, that's how you ask for money in the real world. You don't just go to your boss and go, please, come on, Dr. Asidebe, come on, be a good chum. She's not going to fall for it because she, along with the chief financial officer, has a fiduciary responsibility to the campus, right? And the people on the 5th floor, Chef Hathaway and all them, every week they're doing just this. And that is what? Which system in play, and then the next step, let's go here, and they give you some ways on how to investigate, what things to look at. And of course, you can Google third-party products. And again, I don't like make a graphic and whatnot. So the second part is, okay, now that you have your 4 systems, why they're important, and you have some commercial options viable, your next task is infrastructure and architecture. Okay, how are you going to do it? Okay, I'm going to do it half in-house clinical personnel, half HR, and then outside. And then, of course, justify why you're going to do it that way. I want all my financials outsourced. And, one reason is I don't trust myself. I don't trust my own people. I want somebody outside looking in. Laboratory, which one's more cost effective? Am I going to do all the labs, part of the labs? So now the task 2, you don't have to be as specific as the first part of the first task. The first part is way more specific. And the second part is, once you have this data here, okay, how are we going to do it? Okay, like an example would be like written like a summary. Hey, all clinical people, all electronic medical records will be with this particular company. All HR would be in-house for the following reasons. Financial will be for both external and internal audits. External audits will be performed by this company, right? Which we already found that is the best commercial option. And last but not least, I'm just throwing things out there. That's typically of a typical hospital. Specialty laboratories such as like HIV testing, COVID, what else is really HIV, COVID? Oh yeah, and what do you call that? Poisons, toxicology will be done outsourced. We do not have the funds nor the requests because HIV testing isn't common in a hospital, and as well as toxicology, things like that. They're not as common as the regular laboratory stuff, CBC, chemistries, and all that jazz. Okay, So we clear on what we're gonna do here? The first part, this. The second part, okay. Decide what your infrastructure and architecture would be, right? Am I gonna go full in-house, or are we going to do some of these commercial options that are available to us? And of course, then the first part, you should have been able to justify why, if you're doing the commercial option, why it's a viable and necessary thing. Does anyone have any questions on this, on the task?
No
Nope.
graph, just paper,
No,
right?
no, just graph, no graph. Come on.
No graph, just paper copy. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm not gonna, because I want to know what's in your head. Okay, fine. You're a lovely artist and you know how to use Photoshop. No, hopefully you guys are administrators. You'll have people for that. But of course, any skill set, someone like I once answered somebody. Someone told me, like, don't you feel bad that you're not a doctor anymore? You have all those things you learned and you're not going to use them again. Which, by the way, was one of the first people who ever said that to me, to my face, was my mother. Right? So don't you feel like it was a waste of time? No, because the number one thing that medicine taught me how to do is how to learn. That's number one. I can learn anything mega quick. And then second thing, being a physician is highly complex and highly stressful. So it learned how, for me, to look at ridiculously huge problems in a very, very simplified, non-emotional manner. And it applies to a whole bunch of different businesses and a whole bunch of different realms. So that's why if you pick up a skill set to learn how to do this graphic, kudos, more power to you, because you never know. You might be the one to make the presentation. But again, when you're making especially corporate presentations, there's people for that, and you can find people for that. I'm decent, I'm good at making stuff, making presentations and things of that nature. But when I was doing budget reporting and corporate stuff, I brought it to our graphic staff. I'm not gonna, for them to make it pretty. But at the end of the day, no matter how pretty your graph is, if you cannot explain yourself and defend yourself, they're not going to give you the money. They're not going to keep you on. It's that simple. And when you get to the higher echelons of what they call tier 2 and tier 1 employees, which is upper management or executive leadership team management, you're only as good as your last quarter. Look at the history of how many CEOs go through every company. It's a very, very precarious place to be when you're at the top. And as a former tier 1 employee, it's not fun, but it's fun. To be honest, it's fun when you win, and it's fun when people listen to you, when you have your data and then the room stops because you have the answer. And not only you have the answer, you have the rationale and the data to back you up. And then when it works and when you make a profit, or when the metrics goes up, that's next to patient care. It was a great feeling when my memos got seen and stuff got done. And when you think about it, as a physician, how many patients I see a day? 50, 60. That's maybe potentially 60 lives that I mess with. You guys as administrators, you affect all the lives, not only the people who work there, but your patients, the staff, both internal and external clients. If you recall your business stuff, right? Remember, we have internal vendors, internal clients, and external clients. So your internal client could be the clinical body's relationship with the Department of Finance, which is actually very adversarial many times. How many times as a clinician, I had one CFO back in the day. CFOs in a hospital, or people who are in charge of the finances of the hospital, did not have any healthcare administration experience. They were, MBAs, classic management or classic finance background. So they used to come up to me and ask me stupid things like, Dr. Garais, do you think you can use less syringes this month? And I'm like, excuse me? And he goes, yeah, you guys are using too many needles. And I'm like, you kidding me? And he goes, this isn't an open meeting. Are you stupid? And it used to rub me the wrong way. It used to get me very upset. And I was, because they didn't get it. They didn't understand that in order to do patient care, I got to do things. But nowadays they get it. But clinical people, clinicians also have to understand that, hey, if no one's minding the P's and Q's, no one's doing lean management, no one's paying attention to Six Sigma or our dashboard, right? We won't have a hospital to complain about. So that's my take on it. So what's due? For module 2 for next week, your discussion and your task, and then next week we'll discuss the lesson. Anyone have any questions?
Module 2, task and discussion next week.
Yes. And that's, what's it, August 26th.
No lesson.
Yes. Okay.
No lesson, right, sir?
Yeah, no lesson, because on the 26th is week 4, right? We'll discuss the lesson, and the lesson will be due for week 5. Like the lessons, think of it this way. The tasks and discussions are like kind of matching, and the lesson is like a week after. I planned it. But again, I will make that chart to make it a little bit more clearer. But right now, if you did everything else, discussion, task for next week. And we're in module 2 currently.
Right.
Everyone good? If we're all good, have a great evening, everyone. Kindly sign off. Or if you have some more questions, more clarifications, hang on and unmute, and then we can do stuff. But it's at this point that I will stop the recording and I will make it available in announcements.